Recently, I made a video discussing the announcement of the Retroid Pocket Mini, and I was overall very excited about this device because Retroid doesn't often release a ton of handhelds at once. They do it maybe twice, maybe once a year, typically. But this time around, not only did they announce a second product, but it was right after their previous announcement that I just completely missed. So apparently we already got the announcement for the Retroid Pocket 5. And while this is incredibly exciting, it feels a little bit unnecessary because we only recently got the Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro. The 4 and 4 Pro only came out 6-7 months ago, and I get that's a long time and we don't exactly have a release date for this thing, so it might end up being about a year since the 4 and 4 Pro when the Pocket 5 comes out. But it just feels a little soon, and considering how little information we have, I'm inclined to believe that it probably will be quite a while until we see this thing, maybe not till like the end of the year. But I've been wrong before. This thing could randomly get released 2 weeks from now and I would be none the wiser. What we do know though, it's going to have a 5.5-inch AMOLED display, it's 16:9, and it's 1080p. That's a little bit larger than their current 4 and 4 Pro, but what is more noticeable is that it has a new design, which I'll be honest, I like it, but it's just a little similar to what we've seen with the iNeo Pocket Air and like those devices from iNeo. It has that very similar like all front top glass look, very rounded, very ergonomic, but overall it just feels a bit of a copycat of a design. Retroid always had a pretty good, visual identity amongst other handhelds. They felt rather unique and really leaned into that retro aesthetic, being super thin and very pocketable, very light and very powerful. So this shift in design language, while super interesting, not very compelling. Don't get me wrong, I'm very excited for a new Retroid device. But what I'm less excited about is that with what we do know, it sounds like this device is going to be quite a bit more expensive. And with the announcement of this device, it makes me believe that we're not going to have a 5 and 5 Pro, we're going to have a 5 and a Mini. So I suspect both of these devices are going to see a sizable increase in terms of their pricing, because I'm assuming that this was also going to have that same Snapdragon chip rumored for the Retroid Pocket Mini. The 4 and 4 Pro always fit in this nice little niche of 4 or 5-inch devices that are super pocketable, very, nice portable form factor. But with the increase to 5.5 inches and the more chunkier design that this device is going to seemingly have, it feels like they would actually go in the direction of having a smaller device that they would sell alongside of it for people who want a smaller device. And that would be the Retroid Pocket Mini that we've discussed before. So this whole new strategy is starting to make a little bit more sense compared to when all we had was just the Mini. If I had to guess and speculate on the pricing, take this all with just a pinch of salt, I'm expecting this thing to be around $200 to $250. The current Retroid Pocket 4 Pro is about $200, and it's an amazing device capable of all the way up to GameCube PS2 emulation. It's honestly an amazing value. And if this new Retroid Pocket 5 device makes the transition to a Snapdragon chipset, it honestly might become a better value. The other things that they're changing and adding with this device are more color options. We are getting a GameCube purple, a Super Nintendo gray and rainbow colored buttons, a black and blue design, just a pretty standard one, and an all-white option, which once again is a pretty standard option. And something else they might have are swappable translucent backs. I found that in one of the many articles for this on notebook.net. Whether or not that is a trustworthy source is beyond me, so take that with a pinch of salt. But it'd be cool if they had optional translucent backs. I'm always down for a good translucent design. Any more information we might be able to glean from Retroid is probably going to come out about next week. Apparently they have released a statement saying, "We are expecting more details to be released about the Retroid Pocket 5 next week, and the same applies to the Mini too." It's unclear at the moment whether or not this includes pricing and availability. but I'd expect it should, but that is just wishful thinking on my part, so take it with just a grain of salt. And one more thing about the design. I'm not a huge fan of the RGB rings around the analog sticks. I always thought it was a bit much. Though not a huge drain on battery life, you do see just a tiny bit more if you turn it off. So I've always either turned it off or set it to a static color, because in the most of the time it's inoffensive, but sometimes it's just a bit distracting, especially when you're like laying in bed, brightness all the way down, and you just got these glowing rings around your analog sticks that are searing your eyeballs. At the moment, we have very little information about performance, but since we are potentially getting more information about this device later this week to next week, depending on when this video comes out, I thought I'd speculate a little on what performance we should expect out of this device. With the current rumor mill saying it's going to come with a Snapdragon chipset, I am very curious to see what that potentially might look like, especially for pricing. Assuming this device is going to land somewhere around the $200 to $250 price point, I should expect or suspect it should include something like the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 potentially, maybe the G3X2 that we've seen in the Pocket devices from Neo. My thinking though for suspecting the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 is because currently the Odin 2 uses the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2. And currently we're on Gen 3 and that's all like the major smartphone sellers are using in their phones. I feel like that's why Odin went with the Gen 2, because they were able to pick those up for very cheap and be able to sell their device around the $300 price point. And considering this device is hopefully going to be cheaper than the Odin 2 and similarly priced to the current 4 and 4 Pro, seeing it around that $200 to $250 price point with a Snapdragon Gen 1 would be a pretty decent and compelling offer, because the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 was honestly an amazing processor, capable of immense emulation performance, still a decent and high-powered chipset. So honestly, it'd be a pretty killer deal. The Gen 1 has enough performance to handle most Nintendo Switch emulation and be able to play basically all of the PS2, Wii, and GameCube libraries, capable of 3DS emulation. Basically anything you would possibly need is potentially here, assuming that's the chipset that they go for. I feel like it would be the perfect chipset for them to use if they want to be around that $250 price point. Then again, this entire discussion could be moot if they don't even, one, use Snapdragon chipsets, or if Qualcomm doesn't even make that chipset anymore. So I have no idea in terms of if they're even still making that chipset, but if they still make the 765G for some reason, I hope that they still make the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. I would love to hear what you guys think. Are you interested in the potential of a Retroid Pocket 5? Would you want to see this device have a Snapdragon chipset? And if so, which chipset would you want it to have? I would love to hear what you guys think down below, because this is a very exciting time for Retroid handhelds. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.